I still remember the feeling. It was a cold Tuesday night years ago, but the memory burns like floodlights on a dewy pitch. We were standing there, in a stadium that once throbbed with the heartbeat of champions, now filled with a quiet despair. A resignation that cut deeper than any defeat. That night, something shifted. It was not just another loss. It was a profound acknowledgement that the club we knew, the club that had once conquered continents, had truly become lost. We are going to tell the story of Olympia Football Club, a name that echoes with past glory but for too long has whispered of present struggle. This is a journey through decline, through years when hope felt like a distant memory, and through the slow, arduous process of rebuilding. We will explore how a club synonymous with footballing royalty found itself on its knees, and the extraordinary human effort required to even begin to dream of rising again. If you enjoy stepping back into these football stories with me, feel free to like the video and subscribe for more documentaries like this. To truly understand the weight of Olympia's fall, we must first appreciate the dizzying heights from which it tumbled. For decades, Olympia was not merely a club, it was an institution, a symbol of its vibrant city. A testament to football played with flair and uncompromising passion. Its stadium, the Colossus, was a fortress where legends were forged, where the roar of 60,000 faithful supporters could shatter the confidence of any visiting team. We are talking about an era of multiple domestic titles, of unforgettable European nights, a time when the very name Olympia struck fear and respect into opponents across the continent. Young players dreamed of pulling on the famous blue and white stripes, of becoming part of a legacy that seemed eternal. This was a club that defined success, a benchmark against which others were measured. But success, as we often see in football, can be a double-edged sword. The core concepts that would shape Olympia's eventual decline and its struggle for rebirth are deeply ingrained in its past. First, there was the burden of expectation. Every season began with the silent demand for silverware, a weight that became heavier with each passing year without a trophy. This pressure, rather than inspiring, slowly began to stifle. Then came this changing landscape of modern football. The sport evolved rapidly, economically and tactically, and Olympia, perhaps lulled by its past glories, was slow to adapt. A resistance to modern scouting methods, an unwillingness to invest in state-of-the-art training facilities, and a reliance on outdated administrative structures began to erode its foundation. Finally, we must consider the loss of identity. As key figures departed, as philosophies shifted with each new manager, the distinct Olympiana way of playing, the very soul of the club, started to fray. It was a slow, almost imperceptible drift away from what made them special, a drift that would culminate in a profound crisis of self. This is where our story truly begins, at the precipice of a once great empire, just before it started its long, painful descent. This is where our story truly begins, at the precipice of a once great empire, just before it started its long, painful descent. The year was 2003. For decades, Olympiana had been more than just a football club. It was a rallying cry, a point of pride etched into the very fabric of the city. Their stadium, the Colossus, wasn't merely a venue for matches, but a cathedral where legends were forged and dreams lived and died with every whistle. The Olympiana way of playing was instantly recognizable, a vibrant, attacking philosophy built on fluid passing, daring wing play, and an unwavering commitment to developing talent from their famed youth academy. Generations of fans had grown up watching local heroes, nurtured through the ranks, grace the pitch, and lift silverware. Their trophy cabinet, gleaming under spotlights, was a testament to a rich, unbroken lineage of success, culminating in an unprecedented run of domestic titles and a memorable European Cup final appearance in the late 90s. The club was financially stable, buoyed by shrewd management and a loyal fan base that filled the Colossus week in and week out. However, beneath the surface glamour, tectonic plates had begun to shift. The first tremor, largely unnoticed by the wider public, was a subtle change in leadership. The venerable club president, a man who had guided Olympiana with a paternal hand for over 30 years, retired due to ill health. His successor, a charismatic but commercially driven magnate with little understanding of the club's intricate footballing DNA, inherited the reins. His vision, while outwardly ambitious, inadvertently set the stage for the erosion of Olympiana's core principles. The initial signs of financial mismanagement were cloaked in what appeared to be progress. The new president initiated a series of splashy, expensive signings, not always to fill tactical needs, but often to generate buzz and bolster his own public image. These were not the meticulously scouted, value-for-money talents. Olimpiana was famous for unearthing, but often aging stars on inflated wages, or promising but unproven players bought at exorbitant prices. The rationale was simple: instant gratification. The club's significant cash reserves, built up over years of prudent management, began to dwindle. Sponsorship deals were struck that offered short-term gains but compromised long-term brand integrity. The club started taking out loans, a practice previously unheard of, to cover operational costs that were now spiraling out of control due to excessive player salaries and agent fees. Investment in the youth academy, once the lifeblood of the club, was quietly curtailed, deemed less pressing than the immediate need for marquee names. Facilities slowly deteriorated as maintenance budgets were slashed. This led directly to the second critical factor: poor player recruitment. The careful balance between experienced leaders and hungry youngsters, once the hallmark of Olimpiana's squad construction, vanished. The scouting network, previously a sophisticated machine of dedicated professionals, saw its influence wane as decisions became increasingly dictated by agents' recommendations and the president's whims. The manager, increasingly a figurehead rather than an architect, was often presented with players he hadn't asked for, creating disharmony and tactical incoherence within the squad. A prime example was the summer of 2004. Olimpiana had just finished a respectable third, but the cracks were showing. Instead of strengthening the defense, a clear area of concern, the club splashed a record transfer fee on a mercurial striker, Ricardo El Fuego Diaz, whose reputation for brilliance was matched only by his disruptive personality and patchy fitness record. Diaz's astronomical wages further strained the club's finances, and his arrival immediately unsettled the existing forwards. Simultaneously, a promising young central defender from their own academy, a local lad dubbed the next captain, was sold for a modest fee to a rival club, ostensibly to balance the books, but primarily to make room on the wage bill for more high-profile acquisitions. This decision sent a chilling message through the academy. Loyalty and potential would now take a backseat to marketability and immediate impact. The fans, initially excited by the big names, soon grew frustrated as the team's cohesion suffered. Matches became less about the flowing Olimpiana way and more about individual moments of magic, which were becoming increasingly rare. The internal discord was palpable. Managers, unable to implement their visions with a squad assembled by committee, rotated through the Colossus doors with alarming frequency. Each new manager brought a different philosophy, a new formation, a new set of demands, further eroding any sense of continuity. The club, once a paragon of stability, became a revolving door of tactical ideologies. A pragmatic coach focused on defense would be replaced by an attack-minded visionary, only for him to be succeeded by a hard-nosed disciplinarian. Players struggled to adapt, often finding themselves playing out of position or in systems that didn't suit their strengths. This constant flux paralyzed the team on the pitch, leading to inconsistent performances and a dramatic drop in league standings. By 2006, the once unbreakable foundation began to visibly erode. The financial strain was no longer a secret confined to boardrooms. It manifested in delayed salary payments, a neglected training ground, and a palpable sense of unease among staff. The Colossus, once echoing with the chants of a unified crowd, started to feature noticeable empty seats, a stark visual representation of waning fan enthusiasm. The magic was draining away, replaced by a growing sense of frustration and disillusionment. The media, initially celebrating the new era of Olimpiana, now gleefully highlighted every misstep, every internal spat, every financial irregularity. The very aura of invincibility that had surrounded Olimpiana for so long was replaced by an uncomfortable vulnerability. But perhaps the most profound and devastating consequence was this loss of identity. The Olimpiana way, once a clear and guiding philosophy, became a faded memory. What was Olimpiana? Were they a counter-attacking team? A possession-based side? A direct outfit? Nobody, not the players, not the managers, and certainly not the fans, could answer with certainty. The distinctive kits, once untouched symbols of tradition, were altered almost annually in garish attempts to boost merchandise sales. The youth academy, starved of resources and prestige, struggled to produce talent, forcing the club to rely even more heavily on the volatile transfer market. The local talent pipeline, once a source of immense pride, dried up. The emotional connection between the club and its community, built over a century, began to fray as players seemed to care less about the badge and more about their paychecks. The soul of Olimpiana, The intangible spirit that made them unique seemed to be slowly bleeding out. The club, once renowned for its strong, self-sustaining culture, was becoming just another football club, adrift in a sea of commercialism and short-sighted decisions. The vibrant tapestry of its history was unraveling thread by painful thread, leaving behind a hollow shell of its former glory, poised for a crash that felt inevitable to those who understood the subtle yet devastating shifts that had taken place. This was not a sudden collapse, but a drawn-out, agonizing decline, punctuated by false dawns and deeper dives, dragging Olympiana further and further into uncharted waters of mediocrity. The echoes of past triumphs in the Colossus began to sound less like cheers and more like distant, mournful wails, lamenting what once was and what might never be again. In our first chapter, we saw an unlikely group of players, dismissed by many, forge an identity through sheer will and a bold tactical vision, defying the odds to reach the cusp of something truly historic. Now, the stage was set for the defining moment, a single match that would either crown their improbable journey or relegate it to a glorious but ultimately unfulfilled footnote. This was not just a game, it was a referendum on everything they believed, a test of whether their revolutionary approach could truly conquer the established giants. The air around the stadium on that fateful Saturday was thick with an almost tangible tension, a mixture of fervent hope from the faithful and the sneering expectation of failure from the wider footballing world. Our opponents, a club steeped in silverware and pedigree, arrived with the quiet confidence of champions, perhaps even a touch of arrogance, certain that this plucky underdog would eventually revert to type. For our manager, this was more than a tactical battle. It represented the ultimate validation of his philosophy, a belief in fluid positions, relentless pressing, and the idea that collective spirit could overcome individual brilliance. The first half was a breathless affair, a clash of diametrically opposed styles, with our team pressing high, dictating the tempo, creating several half chances that refused to convert. Their veteran goalkeeper, seemingly a man immune to pressure, pulled off two incredible saves, reminders of the fine margins that separate glory from despair. We witnessed a collective groan from the stands as the whistle blew for halftime, the score still deadlocked at 0-0, a sense of opportunity slipping away. Then, just after the interval, a moment of individual genius unlocked the game. Our young winger, who had terrorized fullbacks all season, picked up the ball deep, skipped past two challengers, and unleashed a curling shot that found the top corner, sending the stadium into an absolute frenzy. It was a goal born of both skill and the sheer belief that had carried them this far. Yet, the lead was fragile. The champions immediately responded with a siege, pushing every player forward, exposing the tactical risks our approach invited. We defended with desperation, bodies thrown into every tackle, blocks made at impossible angles. It felt like an eternity, a 70-minute half that stretched the nerves to breaking point. The manager held his nerve, refusing to sacrifice his attacking principles completely, instead making subtle shifts to absorb pressure while still threatening on the counter. The clock seemed to move with agonizing slowness, each second punctuated by a thumping heart or a desperate roar from the crowd. Finally, the referee blew the final whistle, a sound that unleashed a torrent of emotion, a wave of pure, unadulterated joy that washed over players, staff, and supporters alike. This victory was not merely about 3 points or a trophy, it was a profound declaration. It proved that a team built on belief, clever tactics, and an unbreakable spirit could indeed challenge and overcome the established order. It signaled a shift, a new standard for what was possible, not just for this club, but for any aspiring underdog dreaming of rewriting their own narrative. The manager became an icon, his methods copied and studied, influencing a generation of coaches. The players, once unknowns, became legends, forever etched into the folklore of the game, celebrated for their courage and their conviction. Years later, people still argue about the tactical intricacies, the pivotal moments, or if that one goal was sheer luck or undeniable destiny, and perhaps that is precisely why the story continues to resonate. It connects to the universal human desire to defy expectations, to prove naysayers wrong, and to witness the impossible unfold. It reminds us why we fall in love with football, not just for the spectacle, but for the stories of hope, struggle, and ultimate triumph that unfold on its green canvases. If you have your own memories of this historic match, or any underdog story that truly captured your imagination, please share them below. This narrative isn't some abstract ideal, it manifested with breathtaking clarity on one unforgettable night in Istanbul. The year was 2005, and the stage was set for the UEFA Champions League final. On one side stood AC Milan, a titan of European football, boasting a squad dripping with legendary talent. Maldini, Cafu, Nesta, Pirlo, Gattuso, Seedorf, Kaká, Shevchenko, Crespo. They were a team of artistic brilliance and steely resolve, widely considered the best club side in the world at the time, arriving in Turkey as overwhelming favorites. Their pedigree was undeniable, their style captivating, and their presence in the final almost expected. Opposite them, in their iconic red, were Liverpool. While a club steeped in its own rich history, they arrived in Istanbul as distinct underdogs. Domestically, they had finished fifth in the Premier League, struggling for consistency. Their journey to the final had been a gritty, determined affair, marked by narrow escapes, heroic performances, and an unshakable belief that defied their league form. Their manager, Rafael Benitez, was in his first season, attempting to rebuild a club that hadn't truly scaled Europe's heights in 2 decades. While they possessed their own stalwarts, Steven Gerrard, Jamie Carragher, Sami Hyypiä, they were not, by any conventional metric, in the same league as their opponents. The odds were stacked, not just against them winning the trophy, but against them even putting up a respectable fight. The air was thick with anticipation, but most pundits and fans alike predicted a comfortable Milan victory, perhaps even a rout. The opening minutes of the match seemed to confirm every pessimistic prediction for Liverpool. Before the red half of the Atatürk Olympic Stadium had even settled into their seats, Paolo Maldini, the venerable Milan captain, etched his name into the history books, scoring the fastest goal in a Champions League final, an elegant volley from a free kick after just 52 seconds. The silence from the Liverpool end was deafening, a collective gasp of disbelief quickly followed by a sinking feeling of dread. It was the worst possible start, deflating and demoralizing. But Milan were far from finished. They pressed their advantage with ruthless efficiency, exposing Liverpool's midfield and defensive frailties. Crespo, the Argentine striker, added a second goal in the 39th minute, a clinical finish that seemed to signal the beginning of the end. And then, just before the halftime whistle, Crespo struck again, this time with a sublime chip over Jerzy Dudek, leaving the score at a scarcely believable 3-0. The sight of Liverpool players trudging off the pitch at halftime was one of utter dejection. Faces were grim, shoulders slumped. The dream, which had seemed so improbable to begin with, now appeared irrevocably shattered. The stadium felt a chill, even on a warm Turkish night. The commentators were already eulogizing Milan's brilliance, discussing the inevitability of their victory. For the millions watching around the world, whether in pubs, living rooms, or the stadium itself, the halftime interval was less about anticipation and more about resignation. Liverpool were dead and buried. Only the formalities of the second half remained. The conversation in the stands amongst Liverpool fans ranged from despair to philosophical acceptance, with a palpable sense of embarrassment mixed in. Few, if any, held out genuine hope. 3 goals down against AC Milan, arguably the most formidable team in Europe, was an insurmountable mountain. Yet, something extraordinary was brewing in the Liverpool dressing room. The atmosphere wasn't one of complete surrender. Manager Rafa Benitez, despite the overwhelming deficit, refused to throw in the towel. He made critical tactical adjustments, bringing on Dietmar Hamann for Steve Finnan to bolster the midfield and switching to a more attacking formation. But more than just tactics, it was the defiant spirit of the players, particularly their captain, Steven Gerrard, that ignited a flicker of hope. Accounts from inside the dressing room speak of Gerrard's impassioned plea, a rallying cry that resonated with his teammates. He reminded them of their journey, their resilience, and the belief that had carried them this far. He urged them to restore some pride, to fight for the fans who had traveled so far and sung so loudly. It wasn't about winning anymore, not necessarily. It was about not giving up, about showing character, about leaving everything on the pitch. That message, coupled with Benitez's strategic tweaks, transformed the mood from despair to determined resolve. What unfolded in the second half wasn't just a comeback, it was a phenomenon, a seismic shift in momentum that defied logic and statistical probability. 6 minutes after the restart, Liverpool struck. John Arne Rice swung in a cross, and Steven Gerrard, rising majestically, headed it powerfully into the net. It was a goal that was more than just a point on the scoreboard, it was a statement. The roar from the Liverpool end was guttural, a release of pent-up emotion and a sudden electrifying surge of belief. Suddenly, the impossible seemed merely improbable. And then, just 2 minutes later, the improbable began to morph into the unbelievable. Vladimir Armeijer, having come on for Harry Kewell in the first half, unleashed a speculative, swerving shot from outside the box. It flew past Dida, the Milan goalkeeper, who perhaps was still reeling from Gerrard's header, and nestled into the bottom corner. The stadium erupted into a cacophony of sound, a tidal wave of noise as the Liverpool faithful found their voice, their belief now palpable, infectious. Milan looked stunned, their composure visibly shaken. The momentum had swung violently, irreversibly. The comeback wasn't complete yet, but Liverpool were playing with an intensity and ferocity that Milan simply couldn't match. Their tactical adjustments had paid off, stifling Milan's creative midfielders and allowing their own to surge forward. In the 59th minute, Gerrard, now omnipresent, drove into the box and was fouled by Gattuso, penalty. Xabi Alonso stepped up. His initial shot was saved by Dida, but the Spaniard, following up with incredible speed and composure, buried the rebound. 3-3. In a span of just 6 minutes, Liverpool had wiped out a 3-goal deficit against the best team in Europe. The sheer audacity of it left everyone breathless. The game had transformed from a coronation to an epic, heart-stopping drama. The final half hour of normal time was a blur of frantic action. Milan, shocked and bewildered, tried to regain their composure, but Liverpool's energy was boundless. The game became an end-to-end battle, with both teams creating chances, but Liverpool's resilience shone through. Jamie Carragher, the embodiment of their fighting spirit, threw himself at every ball, making crucial tackles and blocks, his shirt drenched in sweat and his face a mask of determination. The fans, now fully invested in the miracle, sang louder than ever, their voices a continuous wave of encouragement, pushing their team forward. Neither side could find a decisive goal, and the match spiraled into extra time. Fatigue began to set in, but the stakes were too high for either team to yield. Milan, regaining some of their attacking prowess, created several golden opportunities. Andriy Shevchenko, Milan's prolific striker, had a moment that Liverpool fans still speak of in hushed tones. In the final minutes of extra time, he unleashed 2 point-blank headers at Jerzy Dudek. The first was spectacularly saved. The second, from the rebound, was an even more astonishing double save, Dudek somehow clawing the ball off the line. It was an iconic moment of goalkeeping brilliance, preserving the draw and denying Milan a seemingly certain victory. It cemented the growing belief among Liverpool supporters that fate, on this night, was smiling upon them. The match inevitably went to penalties, a cruel lottery for some, a test of nerve for others. Liverpool's goalkeeper, Jerzy Dudek, who had been criticized at times during his career, took center stage. Emulating Bruce Grobbelaar's spaghetti legs antics from the 1984 European Cup final, Dudek danced, jiggled, and swayed on his line, attempting to unsettle the Milan penalty takers. It worked. Serginho blasted Milan's first penalty over the bar. Haman coolly converted for Liverpool. Pirlo, Milan's elegant, deep-lying playmaker, had his shot saved by Dudek. Sis made it 2-0 to Liverpool. Thomasson scored for Milan, and Rice missed for Liverpool, bringing Milan back into it. Kak scored for Milan, but then came Shevchenko, the man whose late extra-time shots had been so heroically denied. He stepped up, the weight of the match on his shoulders. Dudek pulled out one last shimmy, then dived to his left, pushing away Shevchenko's shot. The save ignited an explosion of joy, relief, and sheer ecstasy. Liverpool had won. They had come back from 3-double down to beat AC Milan, the kings of Europe, in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. Steven Gerrard, the inspirational captain, lifted the Champions League trophy, a tangible symbol of their impossible triumph. The scenes that followed were a whirlwind of emotion, tears, hugs, wild celebrations from the players, the coaching staff, and the thousands of Liverpool fans who had journeyed to Istanbul and experienced a miracle. The miracle of Istanbul instantly took its place amongst football's most legendary matches. It was more than just a cup final. It was a testament to the power of belief, resilience, and the refusal to surrender, even when all hope seems lost. It encapsulated the very essence of what makes football so captivating. The unpredictable drama, the raw human emotion, and the sudden, glorious reversal of fortune. It proved that in football, as in life, no deficit is truly insurmountable until the final whistle blows. For Liverpool fans, it wasn't just a victory, it was a reaffirmation of their club's spirit, a story passed down through generations, taught to children who weren't even born in 2005. It became a benchmark against which all future comebacks would be measured, a permanent fixture in the annals of sporting lore. And perhaps that is precisely why this story continues to resonate. It connects to the universal human desire to defy expectations, to prove naysayers wrong, and to witness the impossible unfold. It reminds us why we fall in love with football, not just for the spectacle, but for the stories of hope, struggle, and ultimate triumph that unfold on its green canvases. If you have your own memories of this historic match, or any underdog story that truly captured your imagination, please share them below.